So what is my religion? Look, it's me, SuperDan, or as my friends call me, SuperDan, because that's my name. I mean, what else would they call me? Anyways, I knew I was going to get this question eventually, so I thought, well, I'll just answer it preemptively. What is my religion? In all my years of experiencing life and studying things and reading things, what model of reality have I tentatively accepted as probably true? Well, I'll tell you. First of all, I want to say that I do believe in science, but science isn't the only way to know stuff. Science is limited when you actually understand what science is. Science is inductive. It looks at the real world, it sees patterns, and it says, these patterns probably continue. It notices relationships of different measured values and certain equations that are always true. And it says, well, we're going to assume that this will always be true in the future. But that's an assumption. Math is different. Math deals with the abstract. You can define things exactly. And so you can prove deductively that if your assumptions are true, the conclusions must always be true. So math and science are very different things. And then faith is something else. Faith is what you do. Faith is a way of managing uncertainty because there are always uncertainties. And sometimes to move forward, you just have to trust that things are going to work out. It's all you can do. Sometimes, faith needs to be rooted in reason, but there are reasonable times that one should have faith. We don't know that there's going to be a tomorrow. We assume that time will continue, but we have to put our faith in that there will be time 5 minutes from now, or we wouldn't even have bothered starting making this video. And it's kind of the same way when you think about your own death. You hold on to, it's not unreasonable to hold on to an idea that you will in some way survive. Something of you will survive. And so all those types of faith all make sense for people to have. And faith exists when you don't have absolute proof to the contrary. Of course, absolute proof, even in the mathematical sense, can be questioned because there's always the chance you made a mistake in doing the math. But still, for what it's worth, I do believe in science. But science is limited in other ways, too. It has to be, generally speaking, it has to be reproducible, but not always. If you're talking about solving a crime, that's forensics. That's considered science. But you can't reproduce the exact crime. Same thing if you're talking about the Big Bang. That's not going to happen again, and no one was there to see exactly what happened. But it's still considered science. Science is supposed to be testable. The Ptolemaic model of the solar system, every time they would measure a difference of the orbit, they would just add more little wheels to make it come out right. And they'd add smaller and smaller wheels, more and more and more, to make it more and more accurate. It was perfectly accurate, but it didn't have any explanatory power. There was no way of telling, well, where should you add the next wheel? Until Newton came along, putting together the observations of Copernicus and Kepler. and Galileo too. He came up with a simple equation that brought together the phenomenon of falling apples, cannonballs, and the orbits of the planets, and so many other things, all in a simple equation, and it had explanatory power. That's ideally what a theory should be, and it should be testable. You should be able to go and test, well, okay, we know the moon goes around the Earth a certain way. Do Jupiter's moons go around Jupiter the same way? Do they follow the same rules there? So you can test the predictions of your model. So in this sense, some people then say God isn't scientific because if you define God as something that's omnipotent, you can do anything, well, then there is no test you could set up, even in principle, that could disprove God. Because then God could do it, no matter how the experiment came out, you could say, God did it. Well, that's not very good. And this is kind of the problems that superstrings had. They kept trying to make it scientific, and it showed promise, but they never could quite make it work out right, and they're kind of giving up on it now. Superstrings could predict any sort of physical universe, was the problem. So the thing is, if you define God a little more narrowly, you could test him. So it's not that the concept of God is in and of itself unscientific. It all depends on the details. Also, there's the question of whether miracles are scientific. Here's the thing about miracles. You run into a semantics problem. What is a miracle? A miracle is simply when something happens that is not normal. Because if it happened repeatedly in a predictable way according to some pattern, it would simply be called science. It would be relabeled as a physical law. So it's a matter of semantics. It's a matter of definition. And seen this way, the Big Bang is a miracle. But all the little virtual particles that pop in and out of the quantum vacuum all the time, that's not considered miraculous. Even though it's creating something out of nothing, it happens in a very specific pattern that is bound by the laws of statistics and quantum mechanics, and it's just called science. It's not miraculous at all. And so I believe that miracles can happen because we don't actually know how things work. And it could be that there are special places and special times where all the different fabric of reality kind of lines up in that point, and you have a topological discontinuity, so to speak, like a cosmic string, for example. They've never found any, but there's this idea that the Higgs field could have these places where it's like the vectors. Well, wait a second. Higgs field isn't a vector field. What was that guy talking about? Whatever cosmic strings are, they're topological discontinuities. They're special places in the universe. And so there could be miracles. There could be just certain dates in history where physics as we know it broke down. Water turned into wine. Snakes talked. All kinds of things. The dead came back to life. It could happen. And so yeah, I believe miracles are possible because in order to make physics work as we understand it now, which is admittedly limited, there's always a little bit outside at the edge of our understanding that requires something that most people would call miraculous. And there's something else, though. The idea of whether God exists is also a matter of semantics. Because, see, religious people usually think there was God, and then God created the universe. So now there's God and the universe. But the universe is by definition everything. So that means there's also a bigger universe God system that you could call the greater universe. And if you want to study how the universe works, why can't you study how God works? Why can't you dissect him and take blood samples? You know, I mean, I'm sure he doesn't have blood, but whatever. You know what I mean. Figure out how God works. Well, at what point would you say, I am no longer studying the universe, I am now studying God? Where's that line? It's arbitrary. So when people they're figuring out what they call naturalistic laws to explain the order we see in the universe without God, who's to say it's without God? Who's to say it isn't God? Maybe it is God. Maybe the entire universe is God. Maybe God didn't create the universe so much as God is a universe, and we're a part of him, and he lives in us and through us and in everything else as well. I mean, who's to say that that isn't what happens? There's more problems. Also, when you see, religion is about who and why, but science is about how. Science is, how did God do it? It's not good enough to just wave your hands and say, oh, well, God did it. That's not an explanation. I want to know how God did it, and that is where science comes in. So I have a problem sometimes with the extreme religious people as much as I have with more atheistic-minded people. They're both missing the bigger picture, and they're missing the matter of semantics here. God might be the universe. Now you might say, well, there's no reason to call it God. Well, all right, well, but there is some strange things about this universe we live in that science has discovered, especially in the last 20 years. And that is, there's all the fine-tuning things of the physical laws. If they were slightly different, life would be impossible. Complex structures of any kind would be impossible. Now there might be some other combination of energy and matter that could work, that could make something you could call life, but the fraction of possible universes that can have stuff like that compared to the fraction that have nothing interesting at all, either a runaway universe just expands super fast, or one that just collapses back into itself in no time, or just has only hydrogen in it, or or whatever, no complex chemistry. The fraction of the universes with life compared to all the possible universes is super, super, super tiny. Now you can say, well, of course we find ourselves in one of those because we're alive, right? And you can invoke the anthropic principle, but it still doesn't explain why the universe is there rather than somewhere else. And it doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain why there's so much additional stuff than the bare minimum necessary for us to ask the question. Like, why are there all these other galaxies out there? You only need ours. Why, the bare minimum you need is to be a Boltzmann brain. Quantum tunneling, the vacuum just quantum tunnels into a state where, poof, a thinking brain pops out of nothing before it pops back into nothing. Clearly we're not that, because you look around, we're still living. There's still all this stuff evolving around us in time. Why do we have a whole universe? It's weird. So it begs it means there has to be something else going on. Now, I recently watched a video by Sean Carroll. He talks about this, but he doesn't think of it in terms of God. He's thinking of it in terms of the multiverse. There's something about it that we don't understand yet that causes this to happen. Well, the thing is, what if what it is that's about it is intelligence? Who's to say it isn't? Because, look, when I look at someone else, I don't know if they're intelligent. I have to assume it based on their behavior. They pass a Turing test, but I have no direct way of knowing. I'm not telepathic. And so it's the same with the universe. The universe passes the Turing test. And so I say the universe is intelligent. And we have evidence that the universe is involved on an ongoing basis. When you look at, you look at evolution, like how do you can't get from step A to step B. There are irreducible complexities here. Whole new organ systems have to appear at once, or you've got nothing. You can't do it in an incremental way. You can't have half of a wing. What's that going to do? Well, you could glide with. That's a bad example, but it doesn't do you any good to have a lens if you don't have a retina. And it doesn't, and they have to be in the same place. You can't have a lens way down in your neck and the retina in the middle of your forehead. That's not going to work. If you want a whole eye, you need a whole eye. So there's ongoing intervention. There's what appears to be intelligence, some sort of creative, loving, driving force. Furthermore, we know that there's always going to be something unexplained in the universe. We'll never have it all figured out. And I'm not the only one to have suggested that Gödel's incompleteness theorem suggests that there never will be a theory of everything. That it'll always be either incomplete or inconsistent. And so far, this is, been shown to be the case, because even when they think they got the standard model basically figured out, except they can't fit gravity into it, they don't know what dark matter is, even then, there's questions. There's questions of, well, do axions exist or not? Nobody has an idea. It doesn't come out of the understanding of the standard model. It allows them to exist, but we don't see them. Same thing with magnetic monopoles. Understanding of electromagnetism allows them to exist if you reach high enough energies in a small enough area, but no one knows if they exist or not. And so I say there's always going to be some stuff unexplained. And if that's the case, the whole religious model here of universe and God starts to make a lot of sense, because you could say God is just that part of the universe we don't understand yet. It's kind of the God of the gaps idea, but understanding that there will always be a God of the gaps, and therefore you might as well just call it God. I mean, there's no reason not to. And if this part is necessary to explain why the universe is the way it is, and it seems to act with intelligence and creativity and love, how is that different than a God? And that's what science is coming to. It's showing the universe is this way. They don't call it God, but that's just a matter of semantics. And so basically, you could say that's my religion, but of course that's not detailed enough. That's the part I'm pretty much sure of. Plus, I've also discovered through some of my own experiences, I found in my own mind there are parts of it outside my awareness. You can't be aware of your whole mind at once, because then what's aware of the part doing the awareness, right? There's always a hidden part. And in recent years, I have found that this has been guiding me and making me a better person. And Sometimes I've even been in conversations with myself where it feels more like I'm talking to someone else, where they even surprise me with what they say, and it helps me to come up with new things. And how do we know that isn't how God works? If God is real. And so I've come to think of this as kind of God living in me. So I say I've met God. So I'm sure he exists in some form. But then of course the question people would have is, which God? Like, which religion is this? Now, here's the thing. I believe that all religions are incomplete. Just like any theory of everything in physics will be incomplete. Unless you have a direct relationship with God himself and you're in prayer back and forth, any religion will be incomplete. But I also believe that God can work through whatever culture you have to reach you and to try to give you hope and teach you how to love and things like that, and teach you wisdom. And so in that sense, all religions are false and all religions are true. Now, I grew up in a mostly Christian country. I had Christian parents. I grew up going to a Baptist church, and so that's what I'm most comfortable with. And so that's kind of how I think of things. But I know that it's incomplete. Now, there is some evidence that makes Christianity more credible than any other religion I've heard of. Lee Strobel's book, Case for Christ, lays this out in a clearer way than I can. But while it's all good evidence, none of that is really proof. If I was told, hey, you have to renounce the Bible or we'll throw you in a furnace, I would probably renounce the Bible. I don't know. I'll find out when I get there. But I am sure that God exists and that God is loving and will see me through. But as for specifically the Bible, I like the Bible, has a lot of wisdom in it. I tentatively accept a lot of its history as true. But I'm not one of these people that takes the Bible as completely inerrant. And the reason for that is I don't know that the Bible I know is really the Bible as God intended it. Because even if you were to say that God inspired the authors of the Bible to write perfect truth, well, it was written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. It's then been translated into English. Someone could have made a mistake in the translation, and when I read it, I bring my own cultural baggage and just my experiences, and even my understanding of what words mean is only because of my parents and teachers and what I've been taught words mean. So I could get things totally wrong. And so even if the Bible is inerrant, it is in effect errant. And so you might as well just treat it as such. Makes more sense. That's the most important reason. I mean, there are some things in there that are really funny to me that don't seem to fit my conscience. And my conscience, I believe, directly comes from God. And if I make a mistake there, it's only one step for a mistake, whereas the Bible, it's multiple steps. And with some people in some religions don't even read the Bible themselves. They rely on their priest or someone to interpret it for them. That's yet another level of mistake, because not only could your priest maybe get it wrong, but then you might misunderstand your priest. So it's an extra layer of where mistakes can come in. And so I always want to take my direct witness of my senses and my reasoning and my conscience over some book that I can never know for sure, for absolute certainty, came from God. Now that said, I do tentatively accept the Bible. I mean, it makes sense. Um, And so people would, some people would say, if you don't take the Bible as inerrant, you're not a Christian. I said, well, maybe I'm not. I don't know. But here's the thing. I think the central idea of Christianity, although Christians can disagree on a lot of different things, the central idea is the question of who is Jesus? Was Jesus the Son of God? Or what that means, I'm usually told, is was Jesus a manifestation of God, the visible image of the invisible God, literally God himself in human form? Or at the very least, was Jesus the one sent from God to save us from our sins? Now, I can answer this three ways. Well, really four ways, I guess. The first way I could answer it is, well, I believe that God lives in all of us. I've discovered him in myself through my own experiences, and he was always there, even back when I used to be an atheist. So I tend to think God lives in everybody. And the Bible kind of backs this up. I mean, mostly talking about born-again Christians, whatever you do for the least of these, my brethren, you do unto me. And is no longer I who live, but Christ lives through me. So those two seem to suggest that God lives in at least some people. And so if that's the case, then God must have been in Jesus too. And it's the same God. And so, yeah, Jesus was God. If it's really the subconscious that drives everything we do consciously, and that's where God lives, which is kind of what I've discovered in my own life, and sin being sort of a recursive feedback loop beyond the scope of this video, then yeah, if God's in everyone, God was in Jesus too. So yes, Jesus is God. That's the first way I could answer it. Of course, people would say, well, yeah, but then Muhammad is God and Buddha is God. But was Jesus God in a special way? And then I would say, well, historically, Jesus is the name that God is using to bring to himself. Christianity is the largest religion in the world. And it's getting bigger. It would be different if there were two rival Christianities, identical except for the name of the Savior. Then there might be a question. But there's no other religion that really fits this model. You don't really have a Savior system in anything else. They're all kind of, well, you got to do this and do that and get on the good side of the gods or God. But Christianity has a loving God that sacrificed himself, and there's nothing you can do to earn it. So historically, I say, yeah, even if Jesus was just some guy with some good ideas that got himself killed, after the fact, God is now using that to bring people to an understanding of himself. So yes, Jesus is God in that sense. God has put his stamp of approval on his name. But there's a third way I could answer this too. I could also say, was Jesus God? Who cares? It doesn't matter. I've met God personally. I know that he loves us enough to have sent Jesus. It fits his character. So whether or not the events in the Gospels literally happened exactly the way described, it doesn't matter. God is still doing everything he can to save people from their sin. And so that's the third way I could answer. And so those three ways, he lives inside everyone, so he must have been inside Jesus. And, we all were made in the image of God. And this idea that Jesus is at least historically special, and that's undeniable. And so God is using him. And this idea that it doesn't matter because God's, like Jesus anyways. He certainly, it would have fit his character to do it. So it doesn't matter whether he actually did or not. Really, that's all you need to know. And those things you can kind of figure out yourself. You don't need evidence other than just what you already know. But the fourth way that most people answer it, and I can answer it this way too, is who else could have come back from the dead, raised other people to life, turned water into wine, healed a blind guy or two, and all the other weird stuff he did? Can I prove that all that happened? No. But I tentatively accept that it did. And so that's the fourth way I could answer. I could say, yes, it's all true. Probably. And that's the best way I can describe my religion. So, thank you for watching. And if you like these videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the like button. And if you really like me and want to be my best friend, you can leave a comment. And thank you for watching.